So when we have schemas, we often feel that our life is out of control, that our emotions have a life of their own, or that we're perpetually stuck reliving uncomfortable psychological and emotional states that we just can't get out of. And the reason is schemas dysregulate our nervous system. So, what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, it's helpful to understand what our nervous system is and what it means to be regulated or dysregulated. So, our nervous system is basically our brain and our spinal cord, and all the peripheral nerves that are attached or connected to the brain and spinal cord, and that extend out to all systems and organs in our body. And basically, the function of the nervous system is to tell something when to switch on and when to switch off. And a regulated nervous system is one that works in harmony, in sync. It responds appropriately to situations, switching things on and off. Now, the reason that we often feel out of control or stuck or our emotions are all over the place is because our stress response becomes dysregulated. So the stress response is basically our body's system for activating or deactivating energy for various reasons. So if you think about, well, I think about it, helps me to think about it in this way. I think about it on a scale of kind of plus 10 down to minus 10. And plus 10 is extreme high energy, and minus 10 is extreme kind of relaxation or just not moving, immobilization. Now, obviously, we think about life and the different energy requirements we need. In our day-to-day life, we will need energy, if we're going about our day, if we're going to meetings, if we have to work, if we're playing with our kids or we're exercising, we're going to need different degrees of energy. And then when we want to relax and, rest and digest, allow ourselves to recover and rejuvenate from the day, we need to be able to fully, deeply relax. And we also need to be able to sleep at night. Our stress response is the nervous system's way of providing energy or relaxing us when necessary. Another example might be, if we're socializing with somebody, we want to be in a state of presence. We want to be calm. We want to be open. We want to be relaxed. We want to be able to listen and share, um, conversation with each other. If we're all really tensed and hyped up, we're not going to be able to have a good connection. So again, the stress response is about mobilizing energy or calming us down. And these two systems, the mobilization, the energy given, is the sympathetic, and the calming down is called the parasympathetic. And in a regulated nervous system, they work well together, responding to our needs, the needs of our situation appropriately. And you would have heard of the nervous system perhaps in terms of fight, flight, freeze. So what the stress response does, it responds to threats in one of three ways generally. So if because it's the amygdala that's responsible for a lot of this, very much, a primary structure that activates and deactivates the stress response. If the amygdala perceives some kind of threat, it will activate the stress response depending on how severe the threat it considers the threat to be. And then if it considers it, dangerous, it will activate the sympathetic. It will activate the mobilization response to varying degrees. It might go as high as a 10, which is like rage or complete panic, or maybe a 7 or 6, which is like maybe frustration, irritation, or apprehension. Now, when the fight flight is activated, we experience a lot of body sensations, which are basically a result of all the um, mobilization of our internal organs and different systems. So we initially have this surge of adrenaline, which will feel like energy, and we might feel a bit shaky. Then blood will be sent to our extremities, our limbs, ready to fight, run, whatever, and come away from our digestive organs, which gives us butterflies or kind of, queasy sensation in our stomach. But one significant thing that happens if the stress response goes too high is that our prefrontal cortex goes offline, which means we lose access to rationality, perspective, logical thinking. And then we are at the mercy of our emotions. We just react all over the place. So that's the fight flight response. It's a mobilization response, a surge of energy ready to fight or run away. And then also what the nervous system does is if it perceives that it can't fight and it can't run, it puts us into a freeze response, and immediately the energy shuts down. The system shuts down to immobilize us, because this was a survival response, when we lived in tribes. Because if there was a predator and we couldn't outrun it or we couldn't kill it, then we want to be as small as possible and like play dead so that it'll just ignore us. So the body actually goes into kind of a shutdown response, which is the freeze response. Extreme would be a -10. So it is like, driving a car. Really experienced, good drivers can manipulate the gas pedal, the accelerator, and the brake appropriately. There's no kind of jarring movements, or, we don't get stuck. The accelerator doesn't get stuck, revved up, or the brake doesn't get stuck, so we can't move. That's what happens when we have a dysregulated nervous system. We can get stuck in high arousal states, in the high mobilization states, or we can get stuck in the freeze states, because schemas activate this stress response constantly. Now, it would be good to reflect here, to think about your own nervous system and what kind of state it tends to be in. So the hyperaroused states, the +7, 8, 9 states, this is where we would experience a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, agitation, restlessness, overthinking, like rumination, racing thoughts. We can't settle down, we can't relax, we can't switch off, constantly activated. So that would be stuck in a hyper arousal state. Or we might get stuck in the freeze response, whereby, we're still functioning, but everything slows down. It can feel like depression. It feels like, you're walking through mud, like just no energy, fatigued, apathy, no positive emotions, disconnected, disassociated, flat or numb or shut down states. And we can oscillate between the two, or we can be primarily stuck in one or the other. And the thing is, it's possible that we've lived in one or both of these states, going in and out most of our life, and we don't actually experience regulation, because, as I said, our schemas are constantly activating and activating these responses. And this happens because in childhood, this was how we survived. If we were in a household which was, dangerous, which was stressful, there was a lot of conflict, or there was a lot of criticism, lack of support. So as a child, you're on eggshells, you're on edge. You would be existing in those hyper aroused states constantly. Your amygdala on alert, like, where's the next criticism coming from? What have I done wrong now? And the brain becomes wired to respond to life in that way, in a fight, flight, survival way. Or if our response, reaction to our childhood environment was to be small, to shut down, to not speak up, or to appease people, or to, constantly try and do things to keep the peace, we can live in that kind of shut down state as well. And then that's the way our nervous system becomes wired in response to life. So as adults, we live in a dysregulated nervous system state. Now, if you look at this diagram, this can it's a visual of what it looks like. So we've talked about hyperarousal, high energy, anger, overwhelm, etc. Hypoarousal, free state. This is where shame also lives. And then we have something in the middle called the window of tolerance. Now, this window of tolerance basically refers to our capacity as a person to tolerate extremes of emotion, or to tolerate emotions. If we have a wide window of tolerance, we can experience anger, fear, and anxiety, but not lose access to our prefrontal cortex, our thinking brain. We are able to contain the emotions, which means we can feel the emotions, very connected to them, but they don't drive our behavior. We're able to still stay present and reflect on these intense feelings, process them, and then choose responses. Now, when we have childhoods that are not ideal, where, the kind of childhoods where schemas develop, we have a very narrow window of tolerance because we've never been helped or shown to tolerate difficult emotions. We had to deal with it ourselves, and the only way was to go into, hyperarousal or hypoarousal states. So we don't have a very wide window of tolerance. So as adults, then we become very reactive. Now that can either be in hyperaroused states, reacting through snapping at people, constant busyness, talking rapidly, interrupting, fidgeting, restless, compulsively checking messages or social media, basically in a constant moving, pacing way, trying to discharge energy. And we're very unable to kind of relax. Or we, in the hypoarousal states, we end up just withdrawing, procrastinating, zoning out, staying in bed, avoiding responsibilities, or just being generally dissociated. So, in order to heal our schemas, ultimately, we need to be able to regulate our own emotional responses or our own nervous system. We want to widen our window of tolerance because the aim is not to get rid of emotions and live in a state of calm. I mean, that's just a myth. Our nervous systems are supposed to be constantly in flux, activating, deactivating in response appropriately to what is going on. So if we have a wider window of tolerance, we can deal with things much more easily and come back to a baseline. And within this window of tolerance is actually something that we call kind of optimal arousal, or other people might call it safe and social, which is the nervous system state where we have energy, but we're still calm and connected. And it's in this space that we are creative, that we are curious, that we are optimistic, we're hopeful, we see opportunities, we're sociable, we want to connect. We can feel joy and contentment and all these wonderful, human emotions that we all want to feel. But when we are in a dysregulated nervous system, when we live in it and we're going into either hyperarousal or hypoarousal, we can't experience those emotions. We just can't. We're in survival states. So working on schemas, because schemas are a primary activator of the nervous system, they send us into hyper and hypoarousal. Working on schemas actually starts the process of of getting a regulated nervous system. And there are steps you can take now after watching this video to start the process of working on your nervous system. And one of the first things to do is to start observing your own nervous system state. Now, for many of us who have schemas, it's living in a regulated nervous system, a calm system, feels really unfamiliar. So, first of all, start noticing, what does it feel like to be in your body? Are you more in hyper arousal, so agitated, stressed, restless, unable to focus, pacing around, going from one task to another, distracted? Or are you more often in a kind of freeze state where you're unmotivated, lethargic, fatigued, dissociated, etc.? Start noticing. Then start noticing the sensations. How does it feel like for you? Describe the sensations, notice them in your body. And by doing this, what we're starting to do is increase our prefrontal cortex ability to stay connected, to stay online when our nervous system starts to activate or deactivate. Then a second thing you can start doing is with your own scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to -10. Imagine the level of energy that you have at any given time and give it a number. Like right now, as you're watching this, would you be at a 3? Are you agitated or have you glazed over and switched off already? Are you like a -10 watching this? So as you go through your day, just take a moment to pause and go, where am I now? Am I at a 7, an 8, +8? Am I at a -3? What am I? And then what we want to try and do is actively, consciously start changing our state. So if we are in a high state, what we want to be able to do is keep our prefrontal cortex online. And we can do this by speaking because that language will activate it. So this is why people sometimes, as they feel their stress response rising, they start naming things that they can see. It could be 5 things they see, 4 things they hear, things that you can smell. So you're just observing and naming, and this can calm down the system. Also, taking a 3-minute breathing space, whereby we slow our breathing down, we close our eyes for a couple of minutes, focus on our breath, and a long exhale. So it'd be kind of like doing this kind of breathing a few times, maybe 3 to 4 counts in, 4 to 5 counts out, and pushing the breath out at the end. So as you go through your day, notice what number you're at. Take 5 minutes, 3 minutes, try and consciously calm yourself down. This develops our internal capacity for self-regulation. And remember, our nervous system became dysregulated through neuroplasticity. Schemas developed through neuroplasticity. Healing happens through neuroplasticity. And it is absolutely possible to get or to live in a regulated nervous system.